Tim Batt,
G'day.
welcome to Between Two Beers.
It's so nice to be here. So nice to be welcomed into a studio that I helped put together with Jake.
You did. You have a bit of history here. We're excited to get into it. We wanted to start in a really random place.
Sure.
We met up for a beer at Matt Heath's book launch recently.
Yes,
a few months
we
ago.
did.
And really randomly, you opened with, hey mate, what are the headlines? Like that phrase, and I've used it every day since. Shane's like, why do you keep saying that? It's like, Tim Batt, I don't know.
I can vouch for that.
It's a really good opener.
And I started doing it now as well.
Yeah.
I don't even say that. That was a one-off. So that's so great. There's just a bit, well, as far as I know, you're not very good at knowing your own little idiosyncrasies. But as far as I know, that isn't a Timism. That just happened in the moment. Organic bit of improv, a gift.
That's why it's so beautiful.
Yeah,
I
it
use
was.
it all the time when meeting up with a sort of a casual acquaintance. What's the headlines, man?
I use it every morning.
It's good though, isn't it? Because like then you're kind of throwing it over to the other person. They can give you good or bad, whatever they want to talk about.
You respond to it, so that's not a headline, mate. That's you know, that should be buried in the story.
Yeah,
Like,
this page
what else
6.
you got?
I want front page.
Yeah, no, it's good. But the connection to the studio, you sat in and produced our episode with Iain Armstrong, which was our most popular episode of this year.
Oh, I kind
To
of feel
date.
bad because Jake put so much work into the show that I
Sorry, Jake.
for one, and it was the big one.
Yeah,
But,
how impressive was he, Iain?
Oh my god, that was incredible. Yeah, that was a really incredible chat. That like one of those dudes that you hear him talk about his life and stuff, and you do start to go, what the fuck am I up to? Right?
Oh, you've
Like, I
been up
need
to a lot, as we'll find out.
I need to pull finger a little bit here.
Yeah.
You've produced a lot of podcasts. Was that experience any different to the way or what you do with other people?
Yeah.
And how so?
Well, I mean, yeah, as you say, I've produced a lot of different podcasts, and the exact nature of that role differs depending on whose it is. But generally speaking, I help someone sort of formulate their idea a little bit, get them in the room. I'm quite into helping them with the technical bits and then let them take the lead on the creative stuff. Obviously, that's what I did with you. I just hit the record button because everything was good to go. I don't really consider that I produced that episode you guys did. I sat down in a chair and hit record.
And you cocked up
Everything
the
was
screen,
sweet.
remember? You had the wrong screen on at the start.
I do remember that. And I remember that you cottoned onto it
Yeah.
like, instantly, which thank God.
Yeah.
The biggest episode, and I've bloody ballsed up the screen. In my defense, it was my first and only time recording
Never
you guys.
again.
So, never again. I never got back.
Never
on
again.
second
I love
chance.
that you were randomly involved in that because it kind of speaks to how you've operated in the New Zealand podcast scene. You've just kind of had a hand in everything. You've created some giants, but you've also produced a bunch. I wanted to start just briefly talking about the podcast sort of ecosystem in New Zealand. Like, where are we at? Like, have we been slow to pick up on the whole
Between
podcast
two
thing?
beers?
No. Yeah.
The country. Yeah, it's a good question. So by way of context, I've been podcasting for over 10 years, and I actually worked for a company called Acast a couple of years ago as their sort of New Zealand boots on the ground for a year. And so I've sort of had a little bit of a viewpoint from inside and externally outside looking in. And we are behind the times in New Zealand. The thing that I'll give you my 2 cents, and this is why I don't work for anyone, so I can just like say shit and I don't have to be like super accountable to a boss or anything. I think our 2 big media companies that make audio stuff, which is NZME and MediaWorks, slept on it for fucking ages, and it killed me because I was just watching these 2 companies that had all of the talent and all of the technical resource to put together fantastic shows, and I just kept waiting for them to like get onto it, and it kept not happening. And they have now, and I would even say like very much have caught up, and they sort of, you know, they've put a lot of resource in the last sort of 3-4 years into podcasting because they've had to. That's where the market and the money has been now, but they could have been onto it so much earlier and just like been real innovators in the space. But yeah, so that I think the two big radio companies in New Zealand not getting in early enough and with enough steam back in the day held it back a bit. And then the other classic thing is just money. Like we're a small country. There's a lot that comes with that. There's less money kind of floating around, and the money that is there, there's usually like less money that's chasing risk. So like in the media space, if you've got sponsors who are willing to spend some money on sponsoring a show, they're typically not going to want to take a risk on a new unproven medium. And so then it becomes quite chicken and egg. It's like, the big boys aren't doing a show because the money's not coming in. The money's not going in there because there's no proven big shows. And so then everything just kind of gets like seized up for a few years. But what it has meant is that under the surface, there's just been all these cowboys like myself just rolling around in their bedrooms with a Yeti Pro, just making shit and putting it out.
It certainly feels to me like 2024 is the year of the podcast. It's like anyone who's been on radio or TV is creating a podcast.
Yeah, which is not a good sign, to be honest.
Yeah,
it feels like the bubble's bursting.
The market has
Jumping the
flooded.
shark.
But if you go back, like I remember listening to the Ricky Gervais podcast in 2005
Same,
with Stephen Merchant and Carl Pilkington.
That's right, yeah.
And I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And that was however many years ago that is. And
It
then
was-
it kind of died down and then Serial sort of brought it back up, right?
exactly.
So, but that's still like a decade ago. Like it feels like we are slow to pick up on it.
Yeah, definitely. And you've got, I totally agree with the phases that you've mentioned as well. That was it XFM?
Yeah.
that they were on together. That Ricky Gervais radio show podcast. That was like the OG podcast so long ago. I think in people's heads, a lot of people go Serial was the first thing, but that was actually, I would sort of call that the second wave of podcasting when that happened, which would have been what, 12, 13, something like that.
Yeah, you got me on that, and I didn't listen to it until like 2017. So I was like late adopter.
And then Joe Rogan is the other obvious like big boy who was doing it for ages and is such proof of this theory that I've had of internet content, which is just like the internet rewards quantity.
Yeah.
The
that's a
internet
nugget.
really likes lots.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to be the very best thing in the world. We just want heaps from someone. And if you can keep giving like a small audience just a lot of yourself.
That's actually funny you should say that. It's frustrated me about the research I've done for this because normally I try to listen to everything that our guest has been on.
Yeah.
But you've done a
hard.
shitload of
Yeah.
podcasts, eh? Worst Air Idea of All Time must have about 1,000 on its own, and Socrates on the Bar and Titanic Sinks, and there's a lot out there, Tim.
Fool's errand.
Too much.
Yeah, but there is lots of stuff of you, but like very little long. Actually, no, that's not even true either. There's so much niche stuff as well, like real long form.
So
real good areas.
there's a lot to cover. So I've written a little paragraph about who Tim Batt is for those listening who don't know. So here we go.
My eulogy.
So you created a podcast with Guy Montgomery that has had 20 million downloads. 2 different podcasts you've created have won comedy awards. You have your own podcast network. You have produced radio for Matt Heath and Kevin Black. You're a stand-up comedian. You are co-chair of the New Zealand Comedy Guild. You've hosted a live political chat show on TVNZ. You've helped Chloe Swarbrick run her last 2 election campaigns. And you're a father of 2 kids under 3.
Yeah.
Is that you?
That's me.
Miss
Yeah.
anything?
I just, I didn't help. I contributed to the campaign for Chloe. I don't want to sort of blow that up
You
beyond
helped.
what it was.
Yeah.
I volunteered.
That's
on
down
the-
in
on the
paragraph
campaign
7
team.
or something like that. That's opening part.
But we wanted to work through some headlines.
Sure.
We're
Give us
sort
the
of calling
headlines,
it. Yeah, give
mate.
us the headlines. There you go. So we've picked out 8 and we want to talk through that, sort of like help paint a picture of Tim. So first of all, and I got this from your high school best friend, he said, Tim wrote and directed a school play in high school. It wasn't part of the curriculum. That was just
Just something that you wanted to do?
Yeah.
I've got a version of what happened in my head that might be different from my parents' version, so I'll open with that. But this is honestly how I remember it. I got to the end of 6th form. I went to Onslow College. John Toogood, I think, is our greatest export.
Okay.
I believe. Oh, Taika went there actually.
Good.
So listeners can duke that out between the art forms. 6th form, I was like, man, fuck this. School is boring as I'm going to go to university next year. So I looked up what the requirements were, and you had to get like a pretty decent sort of NCEA average. And you had to get, I think, 2 letters of recommendation from like your school staff. One was from the principal, one was from someone else. And I just like lined it up and was like, okay, sweet. And I did it. I got all the things to do it. And then my folks were like, don't do that. You don't go to university when you're like 16, 17. do 7th form. It's an important year. It's like a, good social year, I did it, and I was so bored that I was just kind of like, looking for shit to do. And so I wrote a play. It took ages and put it on. It was a way to kind of amuse myself.
How big was the cast?
10-ish people.
And
it was quite good. I've got the script sitting around somewhere, and like a few years ago I found it and I thumbed through. I was like, this is pretty funny. The idea was, it was Hercules has to move. So Zeus saw Lord of the Rings. This is during Lord of the Rings fever. I lived in Wellington, it was Peter Jackson everywhere.
I thought you were talking about Kevin Sorbo for a minute there from Hercules, the TV show.
Nah, that guy's dead to me. Google him. Terrible opinions.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that.
Kevin Sorbo.
Yeah, I didn't know he had strong opinions.
I think he's like a hyper-conservative. I'm pretty sure.
Very right-wing.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. I just thought he was Hercules.
No. He was at a time, and then he fell off, man.
Oh, wow. Been cancelled again, haven't I?
The internet got him.
You haven't. Kevin has.
No one's getting cancelled, man. The idea was that Zeus saw Lord of the Rings and fell in love with the Wellington landscape and moved his family, which was himself, Hera, and Hercules, to Wellington, but he kind of didn't know the suburbs, so they moved to Johnsonville, and they all just hated it. And so Zeus, because he was a recent immigrant, couldn't get a job, so he had to drive taxis. Hera was the stay-at-home housewife who'd been deprived of all of her like money and trapping, so she was just like hitting on the pool boy and trying to figure out how to fill the days. And Hercules was struggling with starting a new school and falling in love with this girl, and
quite a creative concept for a 17-year-old to just fart out.
I was bored, man. I don't know what to tell you. I get bored easily, but it was cool. We put that on.
Okay, great. So our second piece is, and this came from producer Jake actually, when he heard we getting you, and he's like, "Have you watched Child Jumpers?"
Damn, you know what's weird that I just remembered? Sorry about that. This is maybe interesting only to me, but the guy who played Hercules was Leon Wadham, who was like in the Amazon Lord of the Rings series now, the Prime one.
Is it?
Amazon Prime one.
Connecting dots.
There we go.
Yeah. Started.
Us Onslow boys.
Started way back when.
We do stuff.
Tell us about Child Jumpers. 2011, it won the 48-hour film festival. We watched it back last night. Fucking awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Like so good, eh?
It was incredible.
Yeah.
So that was, I threw in with a bunch of dudes. Tom Furness was my sort of connection with those guys. Tom Furness, one of the funniest dudes I've ever met in my life. So smart. And he was doing stand-up at the time. He was a brilliant stand-up way back then. And I'd been doing the 48-hour film competition for years. Like I started doing it in high school. You've got to make a whole short film in a weekend. You're assigned genre. There's usually a character. You have to incorporate a line of dialogue and a prop to prove that you did it that weekend. And you have to write it, shoot it, edit it, and hand it in. And I've been part of some heartbreaking, late by 17 seconds over the line sort of situations. Yeah. So, so that year I didn't have a team, and Tom was throwing with my mates, and it was just lightning in a bottle. It all kind of worked. All those guys are slick, professionals now in TV and film. We made this. Tom, from memory, this is a long time ago, but Tom just kind of disappeared maybe with one of the other guys, and kind of we workshopped the idea, which was there was this trend of jumping over kids, and then he just sort of went away and wrote a script in 6 hours and came back, and he was like, here we go, let's start shooting. And we just did. And we handed it in early. It's one of the only times I've ever been part of 48 and got a film in early. We were 4 or 5 hours before the deadline. And it just happened to work. Yeah, it's just one of those things.
It's so well done. I can't recommend enough. Go and have a watch it. It's 7 minutes long. I don't want to give the ending away, but it ends with you sort of coming to your end.
Well, that's the beauty of Tom Furness, and all of those guys are so proficient at what they do. Our camera guy, our editor, everyone was just so good at what they did. And Cam is this kind of character. He was the guy who was presumably sort of Dutch or something. The guy with blonde hair. Just everyone was so good. But Tom just has such an amazing sense of story that even back then, within the confines of writing a 7-minute short film inside of a weekend, he knew the beats to take a character on and to take an audience on. So yeah, I was just so like happy to be involved, tagging along with that team.
Were you happy to be typecast as a skinny arm wrestler in 660's video Rise Up?
You take the roles you're given. Really. That's funny, eh? Because from memory, I got a $25 like Prezi card for doing that, and 660 would be, I assume, probably the most commercially successful band New Zealand's ever made, maybe, right?
And people still talk about that role now.
Not that many people know about it, but yeah, one of 660's first ever music videos. I'm front and center. Very funny.
Did you do any method preparation, like over the top with a hat that turns?
Yeah, I've been skinny my whole life, dude. I've been a skinny white boy, occasionally not wearing a shirt for a long time. So I was preparing for years. Shot at the Basement Theatre.
Fun fact.
Yeah, there you go. For the 660 heads out there.
Okay, headline 4. You once ate a whole can of cat food on TV from the tin.
Oh, yeah. Good times. Simpler times.
What flavour was it?
Whiskers, I'm assuming.
Well, that's the brand. What specific flavour?
I don't know, Seamus. Jelly meat something.
He's a details guy.
Well, I just wondered, like, if you're going to do it, you might have chosen something that maybe was a bit palatable. Did you just go, fucking whatever one?
No,
it
absolutely.
doesn't really matter.
I mean, 85 to 90% of the stuff I do is like have an idea and just do it.
And I didn't.
Definitely part of that.
I didn't watch that specifically. But what size was the can?
I don't know if that's out there. So what you guys are referring to is a part of the final episode of TVNZ U, which was, you guys have talked to Guy Montgomery about this, but it was a briefly lived, youth-focused kind of music TV station that TVNZ ran for less than 2 years, I think, a little under 2 years. So heartbreaking. So they had like Eli Mathewson, Guy Montgomery, Rose Matafeo, so many talented people that they were paying nothing, and they were just there like earning their stripes, figuring out how to make TV, figuring out how to present, like just coming up with ideas. And it was this super interesting, special, unique, innovative, and because no money was going into it, no one was paying attention really at TVNZ. Like it was the two guys who were in charge of it, Matt Gibb and Ollie Searley. And I feel like they kind of did a good job of sheltering all the suits away from it. And because there was no money kind of going in or out of it. So they were just in this little bubble. They shot in the lobby. They didn't have a studio or anything. They just put 2 cameras in the lobby at TVNZ and put these 19, 20-year-old, presenters in there to fill like 3 hours of live TV every day. And
it was in tandem with Facebook, right? It was kind of on the rise of when Facebook was coming quite big.
Yeah, slightly after that, I would say, but they did do really interesting social media things way ahead of the curve. So they had a lot of like social media integration where you could tweet in and people's tweets would get featured on the down the bottom in the lower third and stuff like that. I get so mad about it because I just think it was such a special thing. They accidentally tripped over absolute gold and they shut it down, and it was so stupid because it cost them nothing functionally to have it going, and they were like breeding a real powerhouse of talent there. And yeah, lo and behold, like so much stuff in New Zealand, we just cannot, hold our biscuit for long enough to reap the rewards of a little bit of investment in something.
Yeah.
So they pulled the plug on it. But then on the last show, it was crazy. It was chaos, man. Like I'm trying to remember what it was, but that episode isn't online, and it's because of something Simon Dallow didn't want to be like associated with something that happened. I can't remember what it was.
Was he holding a sex toy or a dildo or something?
That's what it was. Yes, yeah. There was I think you're right. I think that's exactly it, Seamus. Yeah. Well done.
Allegedly.
Oh,
I don't want to sully his brand.
No, I don't think he'd care now.
But people should be free in the bedroom to do whatever they want. But that was
I ate a tin of cat food. Yeah,
you did,
because I thought it would be funny.
Was it?
Yeah, I think it was somewhat funny. Yeah. You add to the mix.
Is it one of those ones where you're in the middle of it and you're like, I shouldn't have?
No. You got to go 100%.
I should have gone 175 gram.
You got to go. You got to go big or go home with stuff like that. Well, if you decide that you're going to eat cat food, you got to eat the whole can.
You do. Yeah, commit.
If there's a rule in life, it's that.
Commit to the bit.
While we're in the space, this is where you met Guy, right? The Loo Revue.
It is.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, so Monty sort of told this story, but I was producing Matt Heath at the time on Radio Hauraki in the Drive show, And this thing, TVNZ U, had popped up, and so there were a few of my mates who were like having their own TV slots, their own TV shows on there. Guy Montgomery and Tim Lamborn were having to fill, I think, like 3 hours every weekday, and they had no budget to do anything. So they would throw to the odd music video, and they had these weird little kind of MTV style shows that they would play in the middle of it, but they had to fill like a lot of time. So they just put the word out. If anyone's got any ideas for a segment, by all means, come on in. And I came up with this idea of the Loo Revue, which was me just reviewing public toilets around New Zealand to give people the good word. And Guy, moments before we went live, and I don't think I'd even met him before. I think I got teed into it through Tim Lamborn somehow. And Guy just sort of leaned over to me just before we were about to go, and he goes something like, "Oh, hey man, just so you know, I'm going to be real mean to you." And I just said, "Bring it on, dude. Like, go for it." Yeah. And we just developed this really cool dynamic on the show where I would come in on a Monday and review the toilets, and he was always just kind of furious that I was there, that I'd been let in the building, that like I was soaking up time on his show for this stupid thing. And I was playing this real sort of pathetic, downtrodden character who treated it really seriously, and his life was crumbling around him. And you would just get these little clues, to what was happening. Guy would sort of quiz me on what was happening that week. And be like, wow, I'm out of the house now, but it's less material possessions to worry about, isn't it? So, and he was sort of this perennially optimistic but downtrodden dude. And it was a funny little character thing, but then the audience loved it. Like, it became this really sort of beloved segment, and they really got on my side. And like even friends of Guy would be like, "Dude, you got to tone it down with that Tim." Like, he's going through a lot, and you're being quite an asshole to him. So you might just want to adjust that a little bit. It's a fucking bit.
Yeah.
So good.
But this laid the platform for your working career together. But did you immediately, obviously, hit it off with chemistry on the screen? But did you become best mates straight away as well? Did that take a while to become close friends?
It's an interesting question. It's interesting with dudes, isn't it? I think guys have a fascinating trajectory into friendship. I think there's no substitute for time, really. It's just guys hanging out for long enough.
Yeah.
And before you know it,
Yeah.
you've kind of...
Started a podcast.
You've started a podcast.
And you spend every fucking minute of every fucking day with that person.
And you trip over a bit where...
sorry.
Yeah, all right, man. There's some stuff you want to get out.
We can throw over. You just kind of cross the threshold into being good mates.
Yeah.
But we should talk about you guys as well while I'm here. First off, I'm curious. Did someone cancel for me to be in the seat today?
No.
That's cool.
No, do you
I
know?
don't believe it.
No, do you know what happened?
What happened?
Your people at Radio New Zealand, because I don't know if you know this, but you've got a new podcast out,
Yeah.
came to us and said, "Would you have Tim and Abby on the podcast?" And we said,
I would have gone with Abby if I was you.
we said we love Tim, but our show is more. I think we'd more like to unpack one person's story, so we'll get Abby on sort of later.
You should. She's fascinating and
Yeah.
hilarious.
Lasutko is very, very good too.
So we
Yes.
will. Yeah.
That's for
So
sure.
so we jumped at it. We're like, hell yeah.
Right.
Tim's
Yeah,
like-
so-
Because you guys are kind of like me and Guy. Like, you've got a podcast together. You've been mates for ages. You guys have been mates since high school. Is that right?
That's
That's
right.
correct.
And you're similar in a lot of ways, but you're also quite different in some other ways. Like, for
Very
example,
Very, very true.
Steve, I know that you sort of shy away from domestic chores. You're not great on sort
man's
of
done
the
his
laundry
research.
and
Man's done
dishes
his
and that sort of
research.
thing. Whereas Seamus, on the other hand, you love sort of hoeing into the house, keeping things neat and tidy. You got a specific way that you fold your t-shirts.
Yes. Matt, you have done your research.
Walk us through it. What's
It's-
so important about the folding up of the laundry?
That's my time to compartmentalize my thoughts
Wow.
and put things into an order.
So you do it in a sort of meditative...
A little bit, yeah.
Fascinating.
I think this. I like things to be where everything has a place
Yep.
in my life.
Yep.
Like I buy 2 of everything now. Yesterday at Murray Rose Barber, I bought 2 sets of hair product. One so I can have it in the house, and the other in my flyaway toilet bag. So if I travel anywhere, I don't have to I didn't bring my hair product. I've always got one in each place.
Wow.
So I've got a laptop charger at the office in Hamilton,
Yeah.
and a phone charger in the office in Hamilton, and then one of each at the office at home, and then one of each in my backpack.
I do that too.
And this is where the similarities are.
And you also worked at Burger King in Hamilton.
Pizza Hut.
Oh, Pizza Hut, sorry. Yes,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Did you enjoy that?
I loved it.
Yeah.
It was my only chance to hang out with girls in my teenage years.
I applied for a job at Starbucks for the same reason.
Yeah.
When I was working at McDonald's at the time in high school,
Yeah.
there was a really cute girl at my high school who was at the Starbucks, applied for a job, there was an opening, got it, was stoked, found out she was the one who quit. Oh, crap.
Guts.
How long did you stay at Starbucks?
I was there for about a year. Great thing about Starbucks, you got the restaurant brand's discount card, which gave you 20% off at KFC.
Pizza Hut, same family.
Yes.
And
awesome.
that's us. Yes, we do have similar dynamics, I think. We're act like quite complementary personalities in the weirdest kind of a way.
Yeah.
It is
You
an
guys
interesting.
fight?
Oh, yeah.
That's an interesting space
to
because so we've just got an office together, right? So the last 6
He
weeks,
doesn't like admitting that we fight.
we have
we
spent more time together across the last 2 weeks, I think, than any other time in our relationship.
25 years.
How's
Because
it
when it
gone?
was just a podcast,
Yes.
it was, we'd be together in studio and maybe the day before or after.
Yeah.
But now it's every day.
Every
and he is
fucking
very,
day.
very particular about, and I'm learning new things about him and it's a journey.
See, because I kind of thought I was like you, Steve, but now I'm thinking I'm actually the Seamus of my and Guy's relationship, and Guy is the Steve.
Yeah, because when we spoke to Guy, I think it was the opposite. And I was thinking, no, I sound a lot like Tim.
Right.
And Stephen was like, no, I'm the one who organizes everything.
If I
and
got a tan.
And I do that. Yeah.
Saw a bit
and
more
a
of the
big
sun.
beard.
Yeah.
And put on about 100 kgs. But yeah, I think there are some real similarities there.
True. Although I do love a flutter, which is a Steve thing.
Yeah.
I love a flutter.
Oh,
Betting.
Betting.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, nice.
Love cards.
Yeah.
Love poker. You lived with 5 professional poker players?
That's right.
He's turning the tables on
I
us.
know, yeah,
Let,
like
let
it.
him go for a little bit. Let him go for a little bit.
It's crazy.
And then we'll pull him
Humour.
back.
I
Look,
fully
humour.
assumed that someone would have done this to you guys by now, but apparently no one's given you a taste of your own medicine.
No one gives a shit.
So what I
I
wanted
just
to
want
ask,
to talk about themselves.
what I wanted to ask you about, Steve, was Karen, who you guys had in that
Yeah,
flat. Can you please tell us about Karen?
Great. Okay. So
he's a
we lived in
mastermind.
Papamoa. It was me and my now wife Bon and 4 other professional poker players. But because we played multi-table tournaments, we would have sort of 20 games on our screen at any one time. So we would play for 8 hours a day, and you couldn't get up from out of your seat to go because you would be wasting so much value in the game. So we hired a maid called Karen who would make us breakfast and lunch, and she would bring sandwiches and things to our tables so that we could sit there and play. We'd race off to the toilet if we needed to, but there was so much money on the line that it wasn't worth our time making ourselves food. And that was Karen.
That sounds a bit like self-justification for getting a nanny in your 20s. But
Yeah. Well, the funniest thing is my wife Bon, she saw the setup and she sort of moved in as soon as we got together, and she would just lie in bed until midday, and Karen would come and bring a sandwich and sort of put it on her stomach in bed, and she'd be watching Outrageous Fortune, and it was a different time. Now 4 kids and she doesn't have a second to herself. It's
no, the tables have turned.
tables have turned.
Man, but what a crazy, that is a unique flatting experience, I would say, for most New Zealanders.
It is. And then we moved to Queenstown, and there was 9 of us. We got some more from the UK, and so it was Bon and 8 professional poker players. We lived in 3 apartments in
a
Queenstown
superwoman.
for about 6 months. That was an
that-
interesting dynamic.
She's a superwoman.
Jesus, that is a stress test. Because you've got 4 kids. Like, that's a stress test on any relationship. But the situation you've just described right up top, that's nuts.
Yeah.
That is running the gauntlet.
It was.
What's
Yeah.
the benefit to having a bunch of poker players living together?
You can talk strategy. You can help each other out. There's little sort of coaching pools, the community there. You're talking about what hands you played each day and what mistakes you made. But also, it's quite an antisocial occupation if you're doing it by yourself. Because they all ended up moving to Vegas, and I moved to Auckland by myself and did it for about 8 months.
So isn't one of them became like a,
Mormon.
Chris Moorman, if you're interested in this chat, go and listen to our pod with Chris Moorman. He went on to win $36 million in online poker tournaments. He's the winningest online tournament poker player of all time. So he lived with me and my wife in Queenstown.
Do you think you're probably the most educated person to make this assessment? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Are the sacrifices
such a good
worth
question.
that kind of money?
It was then. I was mid-20s. I had no responsibilities. I had no mortgage. I had no kids. It was the best time.
Yeah.
We would play 4 days a week. We would go out drinking 3 nights a week. It was like a cool community.
Yeah.
Now, and the games got harder is why I stopped, because,
Right.
the games were quite soft and easy back then, and now they're really hard, and the money's dried up.
Bots now, I assume.
Yeah,
as well.
there's a bit of that as well. But for that time, mid-20s.
Yeah. Time and
couldn't
place,
recommend it.
eh?
Exactly.
Good
Yeah.
on you.
Hey, all right.
Hang on,
we're
it just
going
makes
back.
sense though. I've connected some dots now because 20s is kind of formative years in terms of like establishing your knowledge around
A thing.
life
Yep.
and how you have things. And you had Karen doing a lot of those bits and pieces.
Yeah.
It's
So
when
I
you
would-
learn how to cook a few meals and
Yeah, brush your teeth.
starch your whites, separate them from the colours.
Yeah.
This man speaking my language.
It's all making sense.
Never do towels with clothes.
Right. We'll allow that.
Never
We'll
do
allow
towels
that
with
into
clothes.
Lou, but we're going back, and I like what you've done there.
Yes,
Tim. That's
throwing
very,
us
very
off.
impressive.
You can't drive.
You can't drive though.
Nah, I can't.
Never
Tell us
learned?
about that.
Nah. Oh wait, I can drive. I don't have a full license. But I'll try and get one now. I need to.
Oh, family.
Yeah, definitely. We just inherited actually a Santa Fe. So now we've got this big
Beautiful
car. My
automobile.
wife's got this big car because her dad doesn't need it anymore. So he very kindly gifted it to Zoe, and so I've been doing some practicing in that. I kind of hate a big car. My dream would be to have a little electric car, to be honest, or an electric van. Actually, that would be the dream. But I've looked them up, and they're really expensive. But to your point, no, I don't drive. I don't have a full license.
This has created a weird dynamic. It's like a standoff of who can prove they know more about the other ones. Well, I heard you went to London for 5 days with your 2-year-old to see your brother.
Oh yeah, I did do that.
That's a hell of an undertaking.
Yeah, that was quite recent. That was at the end of last year, I think. Yeah, that feels right, about 6 months ago. It was kind of like I got a bit of back pay from a job, and there was just a small window in my calendar, and my son was about to turn 2, and they fly free before they're 2. And so I was like, oh, it would be a great idea. Get him to the furthest place on earth, the most expensive flight for free. And it turns out the thing I didn't quite think through was the fact that each direction it's 30 hours traveling with a 2-year-old, an almost 2-year-old. So yeah, did that. And my brother Dave hadn't met my son Remy at that stage, so it was definitely worth it. But fuck, it was a
5-day turnaround.
It was an odyssey. Yeah, just there for 5 days.
That's a real undertaking.
And I went to my mate Nick Sampson's wedding as well, which was really awesome as well.
Okay.
Which was great. 5 days whirlwind trip. Like, I didn't sleep a wink on those flights either direction because you can't really. You're in sole charge of a 1 and a
Do have some
3/4 year old.
responsibility.
Yeah,
Apparently, you do have quite an unknown sleep schedule.
an unknown sleep schedule.
Yeah, according to someone very close to you.
It's such a funny way of putting it.
Yeah. Even before you had kids, it was kind of like.
I'm not a great sleeper.
Right.
I kind of hate the concept. It's too much to do. Imagine all the shit I could get done if I didn't have to sleep.
Yeah, the Israel Whitley.
Yeah, but I am trying to get better. Like I have, very recently this week been trying to go to bed at 10. I'm trying to just get into the rhythm of it because the kids are up at before 6 at the moment, yelling to get breakfast and stuff. So it's starting to push back. And I'm getting older, so I feel like I don't quite have the same juice that I had before. But if left to my own device, I can very easily be up till 3 doing something before I'll notice.
I'm just going to write, was the juice worth the squeeze too? Because that's a really good one.
I love idioms.
Yeah.
I love them. There's only one person I know who loves them more, and that's Guy Montgomery.
Yeah.
But I love an idiom.
Right, that brings us to the end of our headlines. I want to talk about the worst idea of all time. And I know we did cover some of this in our episode with Guy. Go back and listen to this that if you haven't already. But there's lots to unpack there. And it does speak a little bit to the friendship dynamic because I went back and listened to a bunch of episodes. And it's a real sort of insight into how you're feeling and how your relationship is in that particular episode.
Yeah.
There were some where you were passive aggressive and grumpy with each other. Some you were both just full of life and beans. But 20 million downloads, a bunch of years. When you look back on that, did it become something that you never could have imagined?
Oh, of course, yeah. And I still don't understand why anyone listens to it, to be honest, apart from it's sort of an interesting social experiment. Guy and I recently did a thing where we re-released the first season on the 10-year anniversary, and we took turns listening to each episode. So like he and I did odds and evens respectively and recorded a little like 5-minute intro to each episode. And it was so painful because I'm like, why am I being such an asshole to Guy?
Yeah.
Like, this is so unnecessary. You're being so rude. Like, you're not listening to him. You're coming in so hot. So that was
Maybe Stephen is you.
maybe. But it is that. Yeah. I don't.
Sorry, we should explain for listeners the premise of the show. Yeah.
So it's a bad movie review podcast, but the catch is the movie doesn't change.
Right.
So we watched Grown Ups 2, which is I think about a 6% on Rotten Tomatoes once a week, every week for a year, and we just keep reviewing it. And then we did that same treatment for a year on Sex and the City 2, and then we did Sex and the City 1, and we did We Are Your Friends, which is a Zac Efron movie where he becomes a DJ. And then we did the Emmanuelle series of softcore pornographies.
Yeah.
Which I always forget, but we did do them.
I wasn't sure where that fit in the timeline, but that is a great piece of New Zealand social commentary. Like, I think there's a very specific demographic that
100%.
that remember that very vividly.
Men of a certain age.
And you can see how I've instantly changed my energy.
Yeah, hard out.
I used to set the football by the door, so if the door opened, you'd hear the football and you could quickly change the channel.
Oh my God, you're a Dennis the Menace of softcore pornography.
Yeah,
at
and
Mum
hardcore.
Dad's house.
Yeah, like explain the show.
So, well,
The movie was
the movie doesn't need a ton of explanation. It's a loosely held together kind of brand name for a bunch of different sort of sub-series of softcore porns that were respectively made by the first two are French, and the first one very beautiful, like genuine good cinema erotica, and that's probably the only one I can properly attribute that label to. The second one not quite as good, but still in their oeuvre, and then it sort of becomes this American thing, and it's
was it one on a spaceship?
There's a whole series in a spaceship.
Yeah.
So Emmanuelle is
Queen of the Galaxy.
Is she the alien? Is she sleeping with the aliens? I think she's sleeping with the aliens to like teach them about human relations or something. It doesn't fucking matter. The salient point is, if you were in the 90s growing up in New Zealand and you had, any of your friends had Sky, specifically Sky 1, midnight rolls around, you better hope they knew the parental lock code on that box.
Or left it at 0000.
Yeah, which most did, because they didn't know that was a thing.
I haven't, obviously.
This was pre-internet, folks.
Yeah.
This was, like, it's hard to explain to the youth how inaccessible pornography was.
Yeah.
And this, you would get, you got some nips in this show, which was huge. Back in the day.
There was more than nips.
Not really.
No, you need to go watch it back.
Not really.
I
can tell you that with confidence. I've done the research.
It's a niche area. But
did
you was part of the Emmanuelle series also Red Shoe Diaries and Butterscotch, or was it just Emmanuelle?
I honestly don't know what you're talking about.
I think you do, but it's okay.
What's Butterscotch?
I think Butterscotch was the one. He was like invisible. The guy was invisible.
Oh, God.
It's really problematic if you watch it back now.
Yeah, right.
It was basically just simulated sex.
Right.
Like a woman with an invisible man.
Oh, not
and
like
he smelled like
Peeping
butterscotch.
Tom.
No.
He smelled like butterscotch.
That was the kind of giveaway.
It's interesting because I know that you're a big dude on scents. You're big on smells, which is probably why this is stuck with you, Seamus.
Probably.
Flipping it again.
You've done so much research on it. How many hours did you do?
None of your business.
I love that.
Back on the growth of Worst Idea. It obviously starts small and it's you guys, and then it gets some sort of publicity in the US.
Yeah.
And then it sort of explodes, right? Like these numbers are huge. Was there ever a point, and I know you did pilots and a few live shows, where you thought this could be it? Like this
the pilot was a real sliding doors moment where that could have come off and been that could have set a whole other trajectory, I think, for us. And it's like, I think loosely everything happens for a reason. And even if that's not true, what happens, so you make your fucking peace with it. But like there was a little possibility there of that becoming a cool thing if that had been picked up, that series. So that was, if you didn't hear the Guy Montgomery episode, we, after a couple of years of the podcast and it kind of getting, a little bit of heat in America, we were pitching to TV networks, which was a really crazy experience just going to LA. And we were doing it kind of secretly too. Like we weren't really allowed to talk about it in case one of them came off. So we would go over there and do live shows, but then secretly we're spending our days like going pitching TV shows to all the major like comedy TV networks over there. And we got like 3 offers, which our agent was like, that is kind of unheard of. Like that's insane. This is awesome. And we were about to go with, funnily enough, it was a channel that used to be the TV Guide, but then they turned into something else. So they didn't have a huge budget, but weirdly they were like on everyone's cable package. So they had a really wide reach. So we're about to sign with them, and then YouTube swooped in with a bigger checkbook and we're like, no, come do a pilot with us. Did Monty mention what the budget was?
No.
I don't think we're supposed to talk about it, but I don't care because it's been ages now and they didn't pick it up. But they offered us $200,000 like production budget to make one pilot of half an hour, which is what you would have seen. My portion of the fee paid for my visa, and that was it because we had to get it under urgency using all these lawyers. It cost like $20,000 to get this work visa done in time. But it was an amazing experience. And that was like, I kind of poo-poo most of my stuff I make. Like I don't, look at that classic Kiwi thing. But that is one bit of work that I'm like, that was a good idea. Like that concept was good.
Still stands up. It's great.
Yeah.
And the craziest thing was just like being in there with Monty, and man, there were a few key moments where I just saw his mind accessing something like super huge, just moments that he would come out with. There's a moment you can see in the pilot where I ask him, because we're on some riff about something and I just get bored, which is what happens. And so I throw a question at him. I go, fuck, marry, kill the Ninja Turtles. Because we were watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles while we lived like the Ninja Turtles. So we were underground in New York City living in a sewer. And he came up with this answer that is just like, I won't do it justice, so just go and watch it. But on the fly, out of nowhere, just gave me this answer without missing a beat. We haven't slept overnight, and it's just so fucking funny. It talks about like getting a divorce to one of them and then remarrying them, and it just goes and goes.
There's so many moments in that. One of them's like the word association. It's like Raphael, turtle. April O'Neil, turtle. Tim, piece of shit.
Yeah. That one I think we did develop. We had a couple ideas that we made in the writer's room before we got in there, just to like make YouTube, see that there was something on our page for their money. And I think that was one of those. But most of what you see in there, we totally made up on the spot, like pretty much all of it.
That's so awesome. Awesomely inspiring.
That's the dream, right? Like you create something with your mate and you get paid a ridiculous amount of money to kind of like create
to give to
something.
Some lawyers to get to the States. Yeah.
Moral of the story. Just do it in New Zealand. That's the moral of the story, right?
What is the moral of that story? Just the moral of the story is, with Worst Idea and that pilot and everything, you just keep doing shit. I always say that, like, I treat everything I do as a test as well, that I'm just like, oh, this is just me learning how to do this thing for the next thing. This is never the thing. Nothing I've ever done is like I consider to be the proper thing. It's just learning how to do it for the next one. So I don't know. I'll die before I actually do the proper whatever the thing is supposed to be. Yeah. But I just treat everything like that.
Yeah. There's a few really cool stories about your time in LA. One of them, Guy's given us, is about Kiefer Sutherland in the coffee shop.
Yeah. We were getting interviewed by the AV Club, which pretty sure they're still kind of big. They were really big back in the day, in the sort of mid 2000s. They're like this, cultural critic blog that was at the top of the internet food chain. They interviewed us when we were there, I think for our first live show. We were talking to them about New Zealand culture and how celebrities love coming to New Zealand. Because like Tom Cruise, I think, had been there recently for was the Samurai?
Yeah,
thing?
Last Samurai.
And some others have been there. And like we've got this reputation for we don't bother celebrities, which I really love. Like we just kind of leave people to it, and they're human beings. They're here doing a job. They don't need to be swamped. It's not like Hollywood where everyone's getting their cameras out and stuff. They can just be left alone. And we've got a good reputation for that. And I was explaining that to the interviewee, And then Kiefer Sutherland walked into the coffee shop, and I just like saw him walk in, and I went, "Hold up, that's Kiefer Sutherland." And he just kind of looked around and then started walking out, and I was like, "I'll be right back. I'm going to get a photo with it." And I didn't even know what I was doing. Like, I honestly, just what I was saying completely went out of my head because it was Jack Bauer from 24, and so I sprinted after him. I was slightly too slow. He got him back in his car, and he was gone. But Guy was like, "Do you realize what you just did?" I was like, no, what are you talking about? I had no concept. It just, my brain went dead. I was like, "There's Jack Bauer. I've got to get a photo of them."
That's so good. Was there another one? And I'm not sure if this was in LA, where you've attempted to write the script of Grown Ups 2 from memory because you watched it so many times, and then you got like a bunch of famous actors to do a table read?
So we did that twice. We did it here in Auckland as a fundraiser to help get us over there to LA the first time. I still remember it. I remember being in our flat, and this would have been, over 10 years ago now, in my flat in Grey Lynn, stinking hot day. We were running out of time, and Guy and I were just punching out pages of the Grown Ups 2 movie by memory onto a script. And then we gave it to, we had sensational people reading as well. Like, we had the people I can remember, Di might have been on there. Josh Thompson definitely was. Rose Matafeo. So like all these comedians reading the different parts, and Guy and I were reading stage directions, and we had no chance to run it before or even look at it. Like, we had just finished it and got it printed before the doors opened, basically for the event that people would come to in the Grey Lynn Community Hall. And we didn't realize how fucking long it was. We started doing it, and we were up to like the 2-hour mark, and there was still a bit to go. And Guy lost it. Like, he just started screaming the stage directions as quickly and as loudly as he can. I think from memory we recorded it, and I like accidentally deleted it because I don't think there's any evidence of that one. That's totally lost to the sands of time, but I remember it. And then we cleaned that script up a bit and did the same thing in Los Angeles, which was crazy. It was packed theatre.
But who was around the table?
Guy knows all of them. I've got a memory like a sieve, but Melanie Linsky is the one that stands out, and Jason Ritter, her husband, and Busy Phillips was playing Adam Sandler and did this Adam Sandler voice for the whole thing. And it was just, that was a really surreal moment, like a packed cinema for our dumb idea in this table read with like legitimate, Hollywood stars reading this stupid ass thing that we had done. Guy and I were just like, what is this?
It is a silly idea, but I've heard you talk about how the feedback you got from people was that it actually helped them through some difficult times in their lives. Like, there's this weird sort of escapism situation going on, right? So, and it did have some real good with your community. Yeah,
definitely. We very fortunate to get a lot of like feedback and emails and stuff. People would they started messaging us just saying like, "Hey, thanks for doing the show, da da da." And originally, I think it was a joke as well. It was like, "Thank you for your service, you brave boys going into battle every week against this movie, psychological warfare, all of that." But then, some people got in touch and were like, "Hey, legit, this, you guys really helped me through a super tough time in my life where just everything was turning to shit. But for 45 minutes a week, I could just put my headphones in and listen to you two idiots." It's such a stupid thing that's removed from everything else in their life and the world. So it's just this completely separate kind of safe zone where it's just these two idiots being idiots against this movie. And it really helped people. We started reading a couple of those messages out, and so more and more people would message us, and then we started doing this thing called the friend zone, where we would do in between episodes basically just responding to fan mail, which would just get more people to message us. And it was like, it's such a circle jerk for us, but like, it's so gratifying to get that kind of feedback. You guys would know.
Yeah.
You must get a bit of that.
Oh, we circle jerk all the time. I've seen you describe the show to Mike Hosking as a low stakes friendship that people can tune into and hear them punish themselves reviewing cinema, and people seem to really get a kick out of it. It's such a self-deprecating but really accurate view of what it is that you've done.
Yeah, it is this. I mean, it's very easy to kind of, I think, over-celebrate your own genius when really there's just a bunch of fortunate things that ticked over and we got quite lucky. But to try and sort of dissect the dead frog.
Is it dead?
It's dead, man. If you're dissecting it, you want to hope.
No chance.
It's gone. Oh, the podcast?
Yeah.
The podcast isn't dead per se. I
Right.
can speak to that. But in terms of like trying to evaluate this idea and be like, this is why it was so genius.
Yeah.
Look, 95% of it is just stumbling across dumb luck. But I think there is something about it's just so inconsequential and it's so stupid, but the commitment is so high. Like we're making ourselves do it. No one's forcing us. No one's told us to do it. We just decided to do it. It's really dumb to do it, but we refuse to stop.
Which is really interesting when you talk about My Week with Cats. A mini series where you guys went.
We went and saw. So Cats had this famously bad launch, and actually,
This
like
is the James Corden Cats.
yes,
Okay.
Tom, what's his name? It's actually so Guy Montgomery on my messenger is renamed to the director of the film to this day. So you'd think I would have it in the top of my mind. It is Tom Hooper. It's the director who made this Cats movie a few years ago. You'll remember it. But the trailer came out and everyone was like, holy shit, this looks like a fever dream. This is a nightmare. He's done a bad thing. This is crazy. So we were super excited about it. We were like, oh, yes. And then opening weekend in America, like no one saw it. It lost a stupendous amount of money. And this is for like the most beloved kitsch musical that Broadway's ever had. And it just did not work. This adaptation did not work at all. It got the most insane use of CGI I've ever seen in a film. And so we were like, this is so beautiful and weird and such a spectacular, special kind of failure. And I think that's our buzz, is like, there's got to be something special about how it's kind of failed. Like Grown Ups 2 it was such an intense mediocrity. Like there was just mediocrity painted across the whole production of it. Cats was this ambitious attempt to bring this beloved property to cinema, and it just did not fucking work. And obviously so much effort had gone into it and money, and it was just bad. So we love that kind of stuff. So we went every day to the cinema, and I think we were probably responsible for half its box office in New Zealand. And we would bring different people. David Ferry would come because he loves that kind of stuff as well. And we had different guests on.
Guy told us about a woman that worked there who was just not fazed or impressed by you continuing to come.
One day, I think I'm pretty sure on like one of the last days we turned up in Cats costumes as well. Like we dressed up, which is like, yep, here you take it. So you're not curious about like
you got no questions.
No one's come to this movie except these two dudes who have been here every day of the week seeing this one film. It's funny. That one was checked out.
Yeah, she was. Right, I'm going to introduce your best mate, Nick Phone, who's given us
shout out
a little bit of background. I asked him to sort of describe Tim. He said, he's always been someone that's willing to take a punt on things, which is something I quite admire about him. He was working at Solid Gold with Blackie, X105 with Stables, and then went to Hauraki with Matt Heath. And he kind of had the solid radio career lined up, but he's always hated that. So he gives me a call one day. He's like, man, I'm pretty keen to start my own company and to just kind of step off that bridge, which is something that a lot of people actually can't do. He loves an adventure. He hates the routine. He's best operating in chaos when he's got 1,000 balls up in the air and it's just chaotic and he's just jumping around from thing to thing. That's his space. And because he's putting himself in so many situations that are outside of the mundane bullshit, that works quite well for his comedy. Ask him about when he was working for an insurance company in Australia and got bored. He was making decisions and claims and he ended up just tossing a coin to decide the fate of people's claims. He had no idea what he was doing and he couldn't care less. That's a good kind of overview of him in a real job, of how it just doesn't work. Tell us about the period before you got into sort of media, the insurance claims and the call centre work.
So Nick has been my best mate since we were about 12 or 13. And the reason why I was working for an insurance company is because we were flatting together in Wellington after high school, and he really liked a girl from high school and found out that she had moved to Australia with her boyfriend years prior, and found out that they'd broken up. And he came into my room. He was like, hey, man, I'm going to go to Sydney and try and get her. Do you want to come? And I was like, yeah. So we just quit our jobs and moved to Sydney.
Because you were working for the IRD at that stage?
Yeah, I was working for the tax department then.
Amazing.
And at the complaints bit of the tax department, which was a wild thing in itself when I was like 19. And so we just quit our jobs and moved to Sydney for a bit, and he went and chased the girl. And so we were just like temping at office jobs and stuff. I ended up working at Telstra, but yeah, I think 2 days just before Christmas, I was working for an insurance company determining who was at fault when it involved a Sydney public bus, like the state New South Wales run bus company. And so they'd hand me these documents, and as you mentioned, I don't drive, so it's like I don't know the giveaway rules in New Zealand, let alone here. So I was like, I don't know. So I just started flipping a coin to determine who was at fault.
Because we
But like, the job's not for you.
How crazy is it that there was a temp put in charge of determining who was at fault for insurance claims?
Yeah.
Like I was just a guy who just walked in there one day and they're like, here's your work. It's like, what? Okay.
Because Matt Heath reckons that's almost the making of your genius, is the fact that you worked in a call center or multiple call centers and had built this confidence of just talking to people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is something to that, especially at the complaints department at IRD, because, when you pick up the phone, something's gone dramatically wrong every time. And it's one of those things where if the problem could have been solved by anyone else, you wouldn't have been getting the call. So it's gone through a customer service rep, their team leader, eventually the head of the call center, and they haven't been able to solve whatever problems happened. And that's when it comes to you.
At 19.
Yeah. No, there's one specific case I remember where I was case managing this situation where a guy was trying to take Inland Revenue to court for breach of privacy because, from memory, he was a drug dealer, and there's a special bit of IRD that deals with people who derive their earnings from illegal activities. And it's completely, Inland Revenue does not do information sharing with the police in those circumstances whatsoever. It's like massively against the law to do so. So there's like a firewall of the information that the tax department has that's kept strictly within it. And It's not passed to anyone, even when it involves illegal activity from the income. And he was convinced that there had been some information sharing that tipped the police off. And so he was like, so I remember being 19 years old and chairing a meeting with it might have been the head of Crown Law.
You're chairing the meeting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because it was my case. So I was like having to bring together all of these parties to figure out what was going on and try and like figure out a way forward and where it was going to go. And if it was going to go to, it had to go to court, or if we could sort of stop that happening. And it's just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, what am I doing here? I'm 19.
That's such a steep curve from 12 months earlier writing Hercules Goes to Johnsonville.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's the time frame in it, right?
Yeah,
you left school and then went to this job.
Yeah. Well, I was working in the call center first because my brother was working there, and it was just like a really well paid. Because then I got to the end of 7th form, I was like, I'm so bored, I'm not going to uni after this. Fuck learning, I want to go earn some money. So I went to the call center. And then I applied for that complaints job just to kind of show my team leader that, I had some ambition, and then had no expectation of getting it, but then got it. And so it was just me and a bunch of 50-year-old women who worked in child support for 10 years.
Yeah.
Because that's the area of Inland Revenue that gets all the complaints, is child support stuff. And then just me randomly.
And then you wake up one day and you think, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to do a 6-month radio course.
No, so Nick was like, hey, you want to go to Australia? And I was like, yeah, sweet. So we both quit and then moved to Sydney for 6 months. And then, I remember I was working at Telstra in the call centre, and I remember waking up one morning, we were living in Newtown in Sydney, and going, I'm going to wake up one morning and be 40 and working in a call centre. Because call centres have this quite insidious thing where they I don't know if this is still true, but they pay you just well enough to kind of keep you there, where it's quite attractive because it's an entry-level job, and you can get a surprising amount of money getting in the door, and then they keep you topped up just enough each year where you kind of like can stick it out. And I was like, man, no good. So I applied for a radio course in Wellington, which I'd thought about since I left high school. I was like, me and a friend of mine had always wanted to do radio. So I was like, screw it, I'll put my name in for that. And then they were like, yep, you're accepted if you want to do it. And I was like, sweet, I'm out.
Your parents must have been like, that was never you, right? The call center, the tax gig. Like, you're writing plays in high school. Radio is more of your calling.
Yeah. Yes, I would say so. Well, I think my folks thought I was pretty predestined for uni.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the only one because I'm one of 4 kids. I'm the only one in our family who doesn't have a degree.
Yeah.
Like, my mum's got a PhD, my dad's got a master's. You know, all my siblings have got quals up the wazoo. I'm like, fucking.
Yeah.
And the six.
Go watch Grown Ups 2 again. Yeah.
But the 6-month versus a 3-year go to broadcast school.
Oh man, I was never going to do the 3-year one, eh?
Yeah.
So if you're serious about radio, you go and do the Christchurch Polytechnic. It's probably changed its name now, eh? I don't think that exists anymore. But whatever the thing is in Christchurch, where you go to broadcasting school, you get the proper qualification. But that just seemed ridiculous to me, that you would do a 3-year qual to get into radio. Like, surely radio is one of those jobs where you just do the minimum to get in there, and then you figure it out from there.
Which is literally what you did, because you landed a job as a producer on a nationwide breakfast show with one of the biggest DJs we've ever had.
Yeah. Kevin Black, R.I.P., who I think, there's no way to tell, but I think there's a pretty good chance he was the highest paid radio DJ in Australasia ever, because he was on like the biggest show at the height of radio.
Well, there's an award named after him now, the Blackie.
Yeah, and so I was his last producer for his final gig. It was during 2009, so the GFC had happened and was sort of washing over into New Zealand, and all the money was drying up. And I remember at MediaWorks we kept getting these all hands meetings where it was like, oh, there's a few job cuts, but don't worry, it's Invercargill. Oh, there's a few job cuts, don't worry, it's Christchurch. Oh, don't worry, it's just Wellington. And we were like watching it creep up the map, and then eventually, lo and behold, got to Auckland, and a bunch of us got let go. It was really sad because, Kevin was an icon, like a broadcasting icon. And
how does a recent grad with no experience get a gig with the biggest broadcaster?
Fuck if I know.
Did he take a liking to you? Like, was that part of it?
No, I think it was just like there was a seat to fill, and they wanted to pay as little money as possible, which is always the sitch in radio and everywhere really. And so they I assume just like ring around the radio schools. I hate to bring it up, I got ducks in our intake of people, so that probably helped.
Yeah, didn't have that.
Didn't get that in the notes. But was it? I don't mean to dumb it.
Well, I needed it to be on the record, so it's important.
And I don't want to dumb it down. But when you got into that level, was it a start just button pushing, or did you have any on air stuff? And was that how his show worked? How did
just button pushing? And I did it very badly. I remember getting in huge trouble because I kept missing the Mad Butcher's breaks. The first 2 days, and getting hauled into the boss's office and him tearing shreds off of me, which was nerve-wracking because, brand new gig, pretty high stakes. I was not doing well that first week, but then kind of found my footing. And then by the end of that year, I was like writing. I was writing like most of the show for Kev to not the whole show for him to read, but I would do segments and stuff where I would come up with some funny ideas for stuff and hand him a script. And there was this one morning where I accidentally figured out, oh my God, this guy is so amazing at sight reading, because I had 2 words round the wrong way and he read them as I'd written it as a typo. So it made no grammatical sense, but he just read it fully confident.
Like Ron Burgundy, Anchorman.
Exactly. But he's so there was no... It sounded completely organic, completely natural. He had these 2 words around the wrong way, and I was like, oh, he's fucked up those 2 words. I looked at the script. I had screwed it up. He was just reading every single word that was on there. And I was like, this guy is amazing. He's sight reading every single word that's on the page, but delivering it as if he's saying it. Like, it was a crazy experience getting to work with Kevin. It was, such a lovely dude.
His pranks are legendary. Didn't they press them onto vinyl and records as a precursor to what a podcast is?
They sold massively, huge numbers. Yeah, so he had LPs of his prank phone calls that they would do. He, I think one of the more famous ones is he rang a woman and convinced her that her garage door clicker was interfering with planes falling out of the sky or something. He had the best wind-ups. Yeah, he was a legend.
And then you bounce out of Blackie and you go to another legend
your old neighbour.
Kind of. Oh my God, this guy knows
Hamilton?
his stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Iain Stables.
Iain Stables.
Sorry, you just, whoa. That is cool. Yeah, he lived over the back fence.
How was that, living next to him?
I thought it was really cool because he was a radio personality and he was a bit edgy then.
Yes. That's one way to put it.
Yeah. I mean, that was before he got really over the line with some things.
Well, you should give some context because a lot of people listening might not know who he is.
So he was, when he was my neighbour in Hamilton, he was on the Edge radio station, which was at that stage, I think it started in Hamilton.
Yeah.
And he was the afternoon DJ. He was kind of a bit brash and a bit funny. And then the pranks, I think the height of his pranks at the Edge was maybe the fabricated relationship that he had with April Idemir.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like she took him to court for defamation of character. Like they were doing it on the TV2 bus, and there was this whole backstory to it. And then I think just situation after situation kind of followed him, and he ended up producing him in Wellington. Yeah, for 11 months, and then the station was off air.
Yeah, sadly, it was an independent station, so it was effectively a startup. So that happens, but yeah, pretty crazy times.
Whose idea was it to jump in the freezers at servos?
I think that was mine. Yeah, so like Ian's still in radio. He's in, I think, Central North Island doing the Ski FM network. I'm pretty sure he's still, because that's like his puppy, so I think he's still.
I was Googling him last night to wonder where he was. I think he'd make an interesting guest.
I think he would too, definitely. He'll be floating around. And I think it took years off my life, but I did love working with him for that year. There was a lot to navigate. The thing you got to know about Iain, for those who don't know Stables, is that he there's only 2 companies that own radio stations in this country, and he managed to get fired quite dramatically from both of them after winning awards and like having top rating shows. Like he was the best.
Kiss My Ass for a Pass. I think that was one of his promos as well, which
I think
doesn't wash well now.
Back when Dom, Harvey and JJ Feeney were doing a show together, he got them stopped at the border and searched for kiwi eggs being in their ass by Border Patrol, and they were not happy. So he was doing stuff like that constantly and just managed to burn every bridge. And so the only option left was to find some investors and start his own radio station in Wellington, which he did, which was X105, which was a top 40 pop station, and ran on. To say the whiff of an oily rag is not doing it justice. Like, I started studying full time by correspondence just to tap into student allowance, because I was working like 55-hour weeks at that station and getting paid below minimum wage for a 40-hour job, and I just like couldn't pay rent. But I loved, throwing into this radio station. So I was studying full time and working 55 hours at the station. And the freezer thing was this segment we came up with called Bait Man, where during summer I would get on my cell phone, I would get out of the studio, run into one of the service stations around Wellington, and there was like a whole kind of espionage bit where I would get into the bait freezer where the ice was without the servo staff seeing me, and then hide in it. And then we would give clues throughout the show, and the first person to find me by opening up the ice bucket lid and seeing me in there would get like some movie passes or something.
Are you on the phone
while
you're
in there? I was on there the whole time. And it's not as cold as you'd think.
Okay.
Funnily enough, like I had a jacket on, but the ice was melting before anything bad was happening to me. Yeah. I was not too bad.
But during those, are you building your toolkits? Are you working tech stuff in the studio as well, and like just getting skills that you might not have known how they would help you in the future, but acquiring skills?
Oh, 100%. And like cutting up bits of audio to, make it sound like I'm interviewing Katy Perry. You know what I mean? Like doing a weekend show where I'm cutting, some other interview she's done in with my stuff, and just doing goofy stuff like that to learn how to do audio editing. And we were filming stuff. Like the biggest claim to fame we had at that radio station is a guy jumped... Warwick Slow is his name. He jumped over the fence when Prince Harry was here and like almost caused sort of an international and it was just Stables egging him on, going, "Yeah, jump over, mate, get in there. And that was bad. I don't think he got any legal charges, but it got pretty close. So we were constantly just being a nuisance.
We're working our way through some of the biggest names in New Zealand radio. So next you go to Matt Heath. You link up with Matt Heath. And the interesting thing about this is I spoke to you in the lead up to his episode, And you credited him with kind of like changing the direction of Hauraki and bringing his friends in and sort of changing the culture. And he said the same thing about you.
Yeah, it's weird, eh? I heard him talk about that and I was like, man, who knows? The truth's somewhere in the middle, obviously. So the way that happened is Stables got offered the job. So Hauraki were kind of rebranding. They wanted to go a bit younger because back then Hauraki was a very old, like it was only playing sort of rock music from the 70s and it was pitched at quite a small demo of sort of older dudes. And they wanted to expand that out. And so the first step to that was changing the drive show, I think. So they actually offered Stables the job. He said, to his, his credit from my point of view, he was like, I'll come, but you got to take Tim as well, which I was so grateful for because the station had just blown up down south. So once again, I was out of the job a year later. And we came up. We were just about to start. He got in an incident with a Jetstar employee at the front counter. It got on the news, ended badly. I think NZME pulled the disrepute clause in the contract and cut him loose. But I was a regular employee, like a permanent full-time member of staff, but I didn't have a show to work on. So I would just turn up in the morning and sort of say hi to everyone and then just leave and go about my day and meet up with my mates and stuff and then come back at 5 o'clock and be like, all right, see you in the salt mine tomorrow, everybody. Top work today. And it took them 3 months to figure out. They're like, I just fucking wasn't doing anything. And then they were like, can you do something? I was like, yeah, sure. So I was like working on the website and stuff. But then eventually they got their stuff together and got Matt Heath to host the drive show and just threw me in there, which was a dream come true for me because I grew up on Back of the Y.
Yeah, were you a fan of that
Hugely,
stuff?
Massively. And all my high school mates were in bands and stuff, so we were watching Deja Voodoo and it was crazy. It was awesome.
And Matt's description of the drive show was quite chaotic. Like a lot of people in the studio, a lot of drinking.
Yeah.
But you would always be very prepared, very organized, and in control enough to allow that chaos to ensue around you.
Oh, as much as I was, able. Like I was a pretty young dude still, 24, whatever. And Matt Heath is quite a force of personality. And I would also say, I love Matt. We've been good mates for a long time now, but he was a little sharper back then, quick, I think a little bit quicker to tell you when stuff wasn't going well and that kind of thing. And it was also an environment where the management were quite nervous about how everything was going. So they were like, we kind of like the excitement and stuff, but you're saying a lot of shit. It sounded pretty boozy. There's a lot of walking up to the line and sometimes crossing the line and da-da-da. So, I was sort of stuck in between these places trying to make everything kind of work and gel and sort of tamp down the very far-reaching bits of guests coming in and saying all sorts of crazy stuff on here, but also encouraging a bit of excitement in that. So, you do what you can, but ultimately there's only so much you can do. And it was a really fun environment. It was just Matt bringing in Spanners Watson would come in and do a segment and Stat would come in and do something and the General would come in and do a competition. It was cool.
Is it kind of like what Nick said? It looked like you had this path laid out for you to go on and sort of conquer radio, but you decided actually that's not the direction I want to go in, and you left to start your own thing?
Again, I've got I just I'm aware that people's memories can be fallible, but this is my version of the story as I remember it. I kept asking my boss at the time, what's a dude got to do around here to get a pay rise? Because in radio,
you've retold this story to me as well, so I know this is your version of the truth.
This is my version of the truth.
I know this is your version of the truth.
Thanks for clearing that up.
I didn't need the pay rise right then and there, but I needed to know what's the pathway here? What are the KPIs or whatever? What have I got to do? And it just kept getting put off. And then I was like, all right, sweet, I'm out. So I handed in my resignation, and he offered me a 30% pay rise that day to stick around. I was like, nah. Nah, you fucked me off now. Yeah. So that's when I bailed. Because in radio, if you're not a name, you're on billboards and stuff, the pay's bad.
Mm. And is that, I think Matt speaks to this a little bit, Matt spoke to this a little bit when we were talking about it, but you stand up for yourself and your principles and your values. And that's probably the most salient example of
I pick my battles though, yeah.
Yeah, right, okay.
Yeah.
So you won't, yeah, okay. If there's
I won't cause Well, hopefully I'm not like a hothead, I don't think. I won't like cause a ruckus for the sake of
It's exactly what he said as well. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, you guys are pretty well aligned.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So the same. So you leave there, and then for the next decade or so, I mean, your best mates are some of the best comedians in New Zealand. You've got this real great circle of talent. You do your own stand up. You start getting into the podcast space. Is that kind of what happens over the next decade? Like, what do you have a vision for who you want to be, or
Nah. I don't even even looking back, I don't even really know what happened. I definitely didn't have a plan going forward, starting at that, but. It was the podcasting stuff was, so Guy and I started doing that, the worst idea of all time, because we got on really well and just wanted to do something together to keep that sort of working relationship going after TVNZ U went away. And then once I'd figured out roughly, what podcasting was and how to do it, I was like, man, I'm surrounded by these hilarious people, these like such talented comedians, and they don't really know how computers work. All I need to do is just give them a hand, like getting stuff online, and they can make their own shows and stuff. So that was the genesis of like I run a little podcast network and me starting to help people with shows. It was just going, you guys are so funny. Please like sit down and record a podcast and I'll help you get it online and everything. The first one was Boners of the Heart, which is Rose Matafeo and Alice Snedden, which was like amazing, sensational. And they actually just did a live show recently in London for that podcast. But yeah, so it's just me kind of recognizing that I was in the middle of very smart, very funny people who weren't that good with tech.
Yeah, and you are very good with tech.
I'm just a geek. I enjoy tinkering.
For all of the like TVNZ U and producing on Hauraki, stand-up was kind of like a 10-year pretty consistent, or 12-year pretty consistent?
Yeah, it was, yeah. It was sort of like, stand-up's very hard to do full-time in New Zealand. There's not that many people who can kind of like be in one of those slots. So I also kind of hate, like I've never, I don't like living like a student. I like having a little bit of money to do stuff when I want to do stuff.
So you're back to the Seamus camp again.
Yeah.
In terms of the personality.
When I moved out of home and I first worked for Inland Revenue, the day I got the letter saying I got the job, I literally went to the letterbox, opened it up, walked that down to BNZ and got a $12,000 credit limit on a Visa. And I held on to that credit card for years because I was like, no one's ever going to give me a $12,000 limit again. I got in serious trouble with that over the years. But it just allowed me to like...
Very similar.
if I wanted to go and have a big weekend, I just could. And so... getting back to the stand-up stuff, it's like I've always kind of had to do a bunch of things to be able to have enough money in the pot to not, live on the bones of my ass. So it forces you to sort of innovate and figure some stuff out. Stand-up's quite hard to make a really lucrative career, but it's like the funnest thing you can possibly do.
Yeah, is it right that the appeal of it was you went to an open mic night or a comedy night and thought, I'm at least as good as the worst person on the bill here?
100%. At the time, this is when I very first did a few sets when I was like 18, and my brother was living in Wellington with a comedian called TJ McDonald, and so I went and saw. So that was around the time when like Flight of the Conchords actually was sort of floating around. It was sort of maybe a year after they had gone over to the UK and started blowing up at Edinburgh Fringe and that, but there was sort of a band of like Corey Gonzalez-McCure was just sort of getting started. Ben Hurley was in Wellington at that time. Di was around quite a lot because he's from the Hut. So there was this band of generation of New Zealand comedians who were just coming up at that time at what is now called San Fran, but back then was Indigo Bar on Cuba Street. And I went to, one of the like open mic New Faces comps. I was like, exactly as you say. I could at least do as well as the worst guy there. And then I gave it a go and I was wrong. That was terrible.
A lot of your comedy has a political slant to it. I'm keen to talk about Chloe and how you got involved, but what was it about her? Was it the first time you met her, you sort of were blown away by her ability? Or
Nah, the very first time is I started sort of paying attention when she was running to be mayor when she was like 20. I was like, what is this person doing? And then I sort of, listened to some of her interviews and stuff. I was like, oh, that's interesting. She's actually pretty smart. And so like the little tiny things, I helped a little bit while she was doing that campaign, with doing some live streaming, I think, back then. And so then just sort of followed her trajectory a bit. Like I've been mates with Chloe for a long time, since those days when she was running To Be Mirrors, when we first met. And then she did so surprisingly well during that campaign that all the political parties, came sniffing and giving her offers and stuff. And she went with the Greens because that's where her values lay. And then she ran for Maunga Kiki, which I wasn't involved with that one. But then when she went for Auckland Central, I threw down for that one and helped a bit. There's like a little, at least with, I haven't been involved in tons of campaigns, but at least with that campaign, there's sort of a core group that manages like all the volunteer activity. So I was part of that core group of about sort of 9 or 10 people that try and sort out how the campaign will work.
Is it right that your kind of social, I won't say social leanings, but your influence, a lot of it comes from your mum and coffees with your mum growing up as a teenager?
Yeah, a bit. Yeah, definitely. Which is interesting. She sort of attributes a lot of her social mindedness to her Catholicism, or not Catholicism per se, but her Catholic upbringing. That she got a lot of, the importance of looking after the community, and especially people who are doing it rough, came from that. So yeah, it's quite interesting as our generation, I think, I think where I was, like at Onslow, for example, it was very popular to be atheist and kind of shit on religion. So that's sort of what I absorbed for a long time. But then as I've gotten older, I'm like, there's some good things about religion that come out around charity and looking after people and togetherness and that sort of thing. But no, my mum, big influence on that. Although I've gone, quite a lot further, I think, left than weird.
But then
although I don't know if she'd agree with this or not. I think I probably went a bit further left than her, and then maybe she came with me a little bit as well after that, perhaps.
Yeah, pull her across.
But then that sense of community, does that, just to loop back to the comedy sector, does that spread into that? Because not only do you do stuff in front of camera and your talent, but you also work very hard behind the scenes as well in terms of looking after comedy in New Zealand through your leadership and governance stuff.
Well, yeah, I think it's really important to contribute to those places. Like if something's given you something, because I've had such massive fun and like gotten so much out of stand-up comedy and doing like, TV and radio and comedy stuff, that like there's so many people there's so many barriers to people doing it, which are really unfair. The fact that it's hard to make a living doing stand-up comedy means you automatically cut out a whole swath of society of like people who can't rely on going back to their parents' place to live if everything goes to shit, or if they just don't have enough money to be able to take the risk to pursue something like that. And so I think it's really if you've gotten stuff out of a pursuit like stand-up, you owe it to the community to throw back in and contribute and try and knock down some of those barriers for other people coming up and just support people who don't have the advantages that you have. I've periodically I get quite wound up about it because there's a lot of people who have done very well out of comedy, and I'm like, fucking, you want to give a little bit of money or a bit of time, kick it back down the line to get some more people coming up through the path, that you managed to go down.
Because I imagine now that you're a parent, it's quite hard to juggle a stand-up comedy career with responsibilities at home.
I've sort of stepped away from stand-up just temporarily at the moment for that exact reason. It's just a bit hard because it's like, you got to be a parent, and I'm like very, very focused on just putting a lot of time in to just being around, just hanging out with the boys. Because I'm very aware that it is an age you do not get back. You do not get another chance with that. It's a really like special time, and I think a lot of people were quite regretful about the amount of time they spend at work when their kids are quite little. So I'm just like hyper aware of that and trying to position myself so that I can just be around, which is why you don't work in a call center.
Yeah.
You get to pick your hours a bit better.
But is that it for you? Like that, the central core of what you do is picking stuff that fit in with your lifestyle?
Yeah, and how my brain works as well a bit, because as I've mentioned a few times, I get bored easily. So I just kind of chase a different rabbit and down a rabbit hole.
So what's the rabbit you're chasing at the moment? What's the
I built a podcast studio at home, which is actually sort of like a TV studio now. I've got like all these cameras and lights and stuff in there. So figuring out what to do with that now that it's built, that's been sort of a dream to build something like that for ages. So that's there. I do a lot of producing, so I put shows on, and I started a live events company last year with a dude called Paul, who's my business partner in that, which is good fun. So I'm trying to like keep my hand in these things. It's just the trade-off of like doing stand-up, you have to dedicate so much time and mental energy to it that if you can't kind of be my take is if you can't be fully invested, which I can't at the moment, it's not really worth trying to do all of these things at once. So I'll still jump on and do some open mics and stuff, and I still want to like keep writing and keep the tools a little bit sharp. But I think I've made a call, for example, to not do a festival show next year, and I didn't do one this year, and that was a big deal because it was the first time in like 12 years that I haven't done the comedy festival. But at the end of the day, you only have little kids for a little while, so.
Have you still got stores of mayonnaise though? Even though you've missed out on,
never run out of mayonnaise.
Yeah,
no comedian in New Zealand will ever run out of mayonnaise.
It's a genuine question, but do you actually get free stuff for? Is it payments in mayonnaise? I know there's obviously
it's interesting because you say free. You doing and this
Best Foods Mayo, by the way, is the
Best Foods Mayo. Shout out,
yeah,
gold tier sponsors over many years of the New Zealand International Comedy Festival. So yeah, I'm going to make a political point off the back of what is quite a funny chat about mayo, but like, so I think something needs to give with New Zealand comedy and the festival stuff at the moment. I helped produce a friend's show, and I experienced this a little bit last year myself doing my show. This year it was really pronounced. Like getting the payout at the end, you put in so much fucking work to get those shows up and running and get them out. And the money that you get back is nothing. Like it often, for most comedians participating in the festival, it costs you money to put a show on, which is crazy. It sucks for the people who are like, in that. And then, as I mentioned before, it also stops a bunch of people from getting on the stage and being comedians because they can't afford to take the risk. And so, like, it's a really hard problem to solve. And every sector of the arts in New Zealand always grapples with this, and particularly at the moment, like arts funding is just going away, which just exacerbates all of these issues. But I'm really trying to figure out how to contribute to solving some of those problems a little bit because it fucks me off.
Do you have opinions on what the future of comedy looks like in New Zealand? We've seen the sort of decay of TV and, 7 Days, which I know you were writing on, and Jono and Ben and Funny Girls and things like these. They sort of seem to be going away. Podcasts are on the rise, Instagram and TikTok comedians and things seems to be like, what do you think it looks like in the next 5 years?
I don't know. I would love to give you some smart answer to that, but I don't think I'm quite bird's eye view enough, like tuned into all the things that are happening to give an intelligent answer. And I also think like trying to predict the future on that stuff is risky, to say the least. But obviously a lot of stuff has shifted to online. I'm kind of surprised at the slow uptake of streamers, like doing comedy streaming stuff online in New Zealand. It's something that I'm quite interested in.
Like Twitch
stuff. Yeah.
I thought that was just gaming.
No, well, it was, and it still predominantly is, but like Twitch is just a platform that facilitates live streaming, and there's a lot of money behind it because Amazon own it now. So there's like all these features, and in particular, there's lots of ways for the audience to pay you money. So people can make a career doing streaming now. But like an idea that I've been trying to figure out in one form or another over like the last 4 or 5 years is, what does a streaming game show look like on Twitch? Like, what does a comedy panel show look like that's streaming? And there's been some successful plays on that. There's a network in America called Dropout, which was a spin-off from College Humor that I've like been following their trajectory because those guys got it right.
Yeah.
really smart. So college humor,
Amir and Jake.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it turned into this huge sprawling company, and then kind of like the bubble burst, everyone got fired. A few employees there, I think, managed to kind of grab parts of the IP and take over Dropout, and there was like 10 of them, I think, to start with, and they've just been hyper focused on making a few really high quality shows. They kind of built their own paywalled platform where they're just using the same group of people. They're all like really talented improvisers and comedians coming up with formats, and they've figured out the business model. They've figured out the production model. Like, yeah, there's just these little pockets of people who are innovating, figuring out how to do it. And I find that nuts and bolts stuff super interesting. And I would love to figure out how to bring a bit of that to New Zealand and just enable more performers to like be earning a proper living from it and get in front of more Kiwis. Yeah.
The most recent thing you've created is the Titanic Sink, which is your new podcast, just recently released on Radio New Zealand, season 2. What can you tell us about Did Titanic Sink?
So Did Titanic Sink is a project where I had a beer with my mate Carlo many years ago, like 5 years ago in Australia. Carlo Ritchie, incredibly talented comedian, improviser, researched a dead language and is one of the revivalists of the obscure Polish dialect. Great musician as well. Just a great guy. Yeah. We were talking about conspiracy theories and how they used to be fun back in the day. Like they were sort of no stakes. It didn't have this whole political, slant to them. It was all about like, Yetis and stuff like that. He was like, well, about the Titanic one. I was like, nah. He's like, oh, Titanic didn't sink. I was like, what are you talking about? And so for the next hour, he kind of laid out all of these details because he's obsessed with the Titanic. And he laid out all of these details to suggest that the Titanic was actually switched for another ship, its sister ship called the Olympic, which was built at the same time, struck accidentally by a naval vessel, put a big hole in it. And it was so expensive to repair it that, so the theory goes, they instead painted the Olympic to look like the Titanic, set it off to sink it intentionally, but then it accidentally hit an iceberg. Yeah. So the first season of the podcast is Carlo giving all of the completely, historically accurate evidence to prove out this theory, to take us through all the bits and pieces that prove this conspiracy theory. Season 2, we won Best Comedy Podcast for that, which we were really surprised and stoked about.
Are you able to reveal, did you believe his theory by the end of season 1?
Yeah, man. Yeah. You should listen to him. He was super convincing.
I've listened to a few episodes. I didn't make it to the end, and I listened to the start of season 2.
With that in mind, who's the Canterbury cat expert?
So Radio New Zealand then went to us and were like, we want to do another season of our podcast with you two, but we need to make it New Zealand focused. So we want you to research the Canterbury cat. And we said, sweet as. And then we took their production budget and just did the Titanic.
Is that real? Is that real?
You have to listen.
Okay. Because I've listened to the first episode, but I assumed it was a setup and a gag.
It's pretty deep. We've just gone Titanic again, and we've found a lot of New Zealand links to the Titanic. So there was a guy called Charles Herbert Lightoller,
so good,
who was the highest ranking surviving officer aboard the ship. He was in charge of Titanic until 2 hours before it hit the iceberg. He went down with the ship. It sucked him down into the water. And then he actually popped back up in an air bubble, survived, wrote a book called Titanic and Other Ships. It was so scandalous that it got shut down in its original print run by the Marconi Company, which were the radio operators aboard the Titanic. And we found a first edition of this book in the South Island, and we also found some of his descendants and talked to this guy's great nephew.
Yeah, the man's done a good job. I'm all in.
Yeah, it's like, there's I shouldn't sort of denigrate my own product, and it's honestly it's kind of me just enabling Carlo as much as possible because it's just fascinating hearing him weave these tales and talk about this stuff. So there's a couple episodes that are pretty dense on the information because once he gets cracking into the detail, but there's also this fantastic interview with this family member of Charles Lightoller, and have a listen.
Yeah,
we like.
Where can we find it?
Anywhere you get podcasts, I'd say. It's called Did Titanic Sink? It's on Radio New Zealand's website. Yeah, it's coming out at the moment.
It's the parts I've listened to are really well done. Yeah, you definitely
Thank
go and check it out. On conspiracy theories, my favorite one is Stevie Wonder's not actually blind.
Oh, I know. I've heard about that one. Yes,
and there's a few clips of like him singing and stuff, and he'll like grab a mic stand or something,
falling over,
or he'll like give someone a high five, like unprompted. He's like, hang on a minute.
There's a clip as well of because I used to do a bit of stand up about this actually. That Shaq doesn't believe Stevie Wonder's blind.
Right.
There's this like interview he gives where he's apparently driving Shaq's car. It's like reverses into a park or something. He's like, that dude's not blind.
Yeah.
So who knows? But that's what I'm talking about. These like low stakes, kind of urban legend style conspiracy theories. Those are the fun ones.
Is the switching of the Titanic, is that quite a commonly held conspiracy theory?
It depends what kind of circles you swing in. If you're Carlo Ritchie, common as, man. Everyone's talking about it. Carlo is genuinely part of a group of people that I would term legitimate amateur historians on the Titanic. He is. And funnily enough, Abby Howells, who we got to come in and guest on the first season, I didn't know this. I was talking to her in a green room when we were just like putting the pieces together for the first season. She was like, I love Titanic. She was not kidding. Yeah. She is so knowledgeable about the Titanic. She's the only person I've met who can rival Carlo for like her knowledge on it. Yeah. And so we got her to direct the second season for us because she knows comedy, she knows story, and she knows Titanic very, very well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what makes those shows work. Someone who authentically is an expert in it, and you add a bit of humor to it. Yeah, it's
100%.
It's gold.
It's hard. It's a hard transition from the Titanic to the late night big breakfast. But in researching, I had this moment where I was like, oh yeah, Tim was on the late night big breakfast. It's like the box skit.
I can't even remember.
Yeah, what
I'm doing on it.
Well, that was going to be part of my segue. Is do you remember all of the little kind of niche cultural pieces of work that you've done?
Nah.
Because you stick out in my mind.
Oh, that's kind. I've got a memory like a sieve. So, and I say yes to everything. So yeah, it's a bad combo for like trying to remember all the things.
But my question around that as well was as an extension is: do you just film a piece to camera with Lee Hart and just here you go, he'll just use it however? Or did you have an idea of how that whole skit would play out?
I cannot remember. I honestly can't remember the skit.
They come to you as the Generation Y weatherman from the studio.
Oh, okay.
And you do like some piece to camera and then it just descends into a skit of everybody wanting their own little box. And Guy's in it and a different part of it.
That sounds great. I've got no memory of it at all.
Okay. I wonder how much other stuff there's out there of yours that you have.
You got to make your peace with it, what I've learned about my memory. It's not, and I don't say I've got a bad memory, but it certainly works differently to other people's because I don't want to enforce, a bad trajectory. But it is what it is. You just keep doing stuff. You get constantly surprised by things you've done and people bring up, you're like, oh yeah, that thing. Yeah. That I think I got because I was, and I don't know if Jeremy would even remember this because it's a long time ago, but I was producing Jeremy Wells and Steve Simpson's weekend Hauraki show, which was Jeremy's intro into the station, which was, I hope he doesn't mind me bringing this up, but it's pretty funny. He would bring a bottle of, what's that really good tequila? Is it Agavera? The stuff that's like tequila but it's not tequila? I'm asking the wrong dude.
Yeah, non-drinker. I thought in your research you'd pick up that.
He would bring a bottle every show, and it was a 2-hour show, and the three of us would get to the bottom of it at the end of that. And it was a Saturday morning. It was like 10 till noon. Yeah. It was bloody great. Yeah.
Good radio.
He's a great dude.
Yeah. Good episode. Go and listen to that one.
I did. Yeah.
Have you got any other Steve and Seamus burning questions or observations that you want to bring up?
I did want to get your advice on fragrances. If there's any cologne that you would recommend, or is it one of those things where it does need to be quite hyper personalized for the individual?
Both. If you were going entry level, I'd run a 3 fragrance operation: one for summer, one for winter, and then like a blue fragrance, like a shower gel kind of a fragrance as an entry point. But it just depends on what you like.
What have you got a favorite brand?
I'm kind of into niche fragrances at the moment, so Montal is what I'm running because it's winter.
Okay,
Arabian's Tonka.
Where did this come from?
I don't know. I mean, I always liked smelling nice.
Yeah.
and
It's a great quality to have, I think.
maybe I'll start a conspiracy theory podcast on fragrances.
Maybe you should. I'm sure there's some great stories from the fragrance world.
Yeah, there probably is. I watched an unhealthy amount of fragrance review videos.
I had heard that. I didn't want to bring it
like
up.
an unhealthy amount. Literally every shower I take, and I shower twice a day, for that 15-minute period, I've got fragrance stuff playing in the background.
Man, we've all got our hobbies. And Steve, for you, I just wanted some parenting advice as the dad of 4 kids.
I think you're doing it right by the sounds. Spend as much time as you can with them when they're young, because it goes fast.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
The most cliched advice you can give. I struggle with that myself, but I know that it's important. So, yeah, hang in there.
Right on, brother.
Yeah, day drinking helps.
Your advice to us?
On
anything. Podcasting. What we're doing. Because let's...
you guys are smashing it. There's nothing I could tell you guys.
Really?
Nothing.
Okay.
You've conquered the mountain.
Nah, there's still more to go.
All right, here's my advice. Stay humble. Stay hungry.
Nice.
Love it.
Nice. Nice.
Tim, it's been great. Thank you for producing our best episode. Thank you for coming and
Jake's right here, man.
Thank you for coming and sharing this chat with us. I think there's something cool here. I like your vibe. I think we're going to hang out.
It's been a real pleasure, and thank you for having me on, guys. It's truly an honor to be on Between Two Beers.
Cheers, Tim.
Thank you.